Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today we have a wonderful guest, Dr. Jacqui Taylor. Welcome, Jacqui. How are you?
I'm grand, thanks. And it's really good to see you and hear from you again.
Great stuff. Well, I know that we met actually in a pretty famous place actually about 6 years ago, which was a place called Level 39, when you were the judge of a thing called InnoTribe.
Yep.
And I was a I was a trainee. I was a person that was working for a startup in the fintech space, you could call it. And I was the poor lambs to slaughter, brackets, learning how to do it in front of yourself and some of the panel, and enjoyed the fact of having to rewrite the presentation overnight after having to be completely massacred on the first part of the presentation. But I know you were very gentle with me, and we had a good chat after that. So it's good to have you on the show today. So
really good to speak to you again.
In terms of what you do, what gets out of your bed in the morning, what do you do these days, and what keeps you busy?
Well, I mean, I'm still involved in InnoTribe, and that for the audience that's listening is around curating the change within the banking industry. And initially, the very early days was a very big task and a very big ask, but these days the banks welcome the intervention, and as you say, we put startups through their paces so that they can really showcase.
Could you try again?
Oh crikey, sorry about that. Turned everything off by her.
What's that, Siri talking to you?
Yeah, I didn't put her on theatre mode. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, so do I have to start up again, or?
No, it's okay. It's all right. I can.
Okay.
So InnoTribe. I mean, InnoTribe. Well, do you want to start again? We can start again if you want. That's easier.
Yeah. No, it's fine. So the thing about InnoTribe is it curates a competition where we judge it and effectively readies the innovation for the industry itself, and really supports founders to profile and almost encapsulate what they're doing in a full pitch scenario. And it's a really welcome intervention. It's something that's hugely popular around the world, and the banks do queue to be part of it. And I've always loved to be a judge there, because having been in the very early days of InnoTribe and on the stage without any help, the idea that you put some support around the founders before they go out in front of the great and the good, I think is a necessary thing. And it's always good to see people prosper from it. So yeah, really good to see you again.
So is that InnoTribe? Because I mean, obviously, I kind of got involved in that because of one of the companies I was working with at the time. So the idea behind it is InnoTribe is like innovation tribe, I presume. That was the kind of that's the branding behind it. And the idea was to because we run it in Canary Wharf in Level 39, which is the kind of I suppose you could say the fintech hub of London to a certain extent.
Yeah, it certainly was. At the time was the largest accelerator in Europe, and I mentor in the London cluster. I'm obviously mentor across the UK and the world now, but that was my home at the time. And essentially, it creates the entire ecosystem to bring everybody together. So investors are there. Obviously we're in the middle of Canary Wharf, so all the banks are there, and it just actually. It was a way of collaborating in a regulated industry that's quite difficult to penetrate. And Swift, as the supporters and the founders of InnoTribe, are almost a welcomed interruption and an innovation in the industry. And I would say that they are regarded as a safe pair of hands to introduce that. And so from all of us' point of view, I mean, I'm one of the original 250 founders in the first, in the digital economy for the UK, which was founded in London. And Level 39 was our posh home. We used to be that rabble in Shoreditch, but then we grew up and had that beautiful facility in Canary Wharf. And the reality of it is, when you're going to create an innovation space, you actually need it to be innovative. And so I always hosted InnoTribe there, because in London it was the place to be. Now we're a huge cluster. We have 32 other clusters across the country. We don't have a tech city anymore. We have a tech nation. It's just under 40% of the GDP of the UK is generated from companies like ours.
Wow.
We're the engine of the UK these days. But at the time, we were that rabble in Shoreditch that grew up and moved to Canary Wharf.
You got promoted to the Canary Wharf. So whereabouts were you in Shoreditch? I thought tech companies were going back to Shoreditch because that's where the cool kids are.
Well, no,
we're everywhere.
We're everywhere. So these days, across the tech nation, they tend to cluster around sectors. So if you're in fashion tech, then you'll be in Clerkenwell. If you're in fintech or regtech, then you will be in Canary Wharf. So that's the beauty of the ecosystem in London and in the UK. We're in the middle time zone. The investment is here as well. We have everybody. The talent hub is here. So that's why we do well. We've been the #1 digital hub in the world for many years, but not anymore because now we're not a single hub. We've got 33 hubs across the country. So it's a different proposition these days because we are genuinely the engine of the UK.
But you said the middle time zone. I presume you mean between like Silicon Valley and kind of Asia. Is that where or Singapore or whatever? Yeah.
That's right. And so if you look at the thing you've got to have for an ecosystem if you're doing innovation is cash and venture capital. And the venture capitalists don't just come from the Valley anymore, haven't done for a long time. And so actually we had part of Level 39 to host venture capitalists so that effectively everybody came to them rather than flying to everybody else. And it's a really good way of looking at the whole thing, is that you need an ecosystem, you need all the points of it in order for something to thrive. Because nobody's interested in a pilot anything. Everybody wants to be a unicorn. I don't need to tell you that, Andrew. You know that that's true. So everybody wants to be a unicorn, but you actually need the climate and the conditions for that. And Level 39 was bringing it. When we moved from Tech City into Level 39, to bring it all together. And the then Mayor of London opened it, who is now our Prime Minister.
Interesting. So, but what year was that? Was that after the financial crisis? Was that the trigger? Because I had David Breer. You know David Breer, who's the group CEO of 11FS. He was on the show back in March, and he was talking about obviously the birth of the birth of that movement and what he's doing with 11FS. And I suppose they've tried this thing about the digital is only 1% done in banking, all that kind of stuff, and that's their kind of their strap line. But I suppose so what you're saying is that when that 250 people got together originally to form that ecosystem around Tech UK or Tech City, that was the trigger, was the financial crisis to say, okay, how do you use innovation to change?
Actually. It wasn't really interesting. Yeah. So for those of us that were there in the day, a bit like who was on the Mayflower, for those of us that were there in the day, actually it didn't matter to us that the financial meltdown was happening. I mean, we founded FlyingBinary in 2009, having done a year in stealth to put the proposition together. What mattered to us was we want to see a change in the world, and we're prepared to put our money and our energy in to make that change. And we used to meet for those of us, if anybody's listening from there, you remember we used to meet every Friday, once a month, where we would all get together. And then I opened Google Campus with the support of the rest of the Googlers, and effectively with 140 of us who could actually be there and have pizza and beer, rather than saying, well, where will we be this Friday? And so I think that the thing that we did was we understood how you put the various components of an ecosystem together. And so I have an initiative with bridges between other countries these days, where we bridge that innovation gap and effectively do a pop-up ecosystem to support some of the other countries that don't have that ecosystem. Because quite frankly, Tech City and Tech Nation as it is now, there's nowhere else like it in the world for innovation, which is why the whole thing is as vibrant as it is. And even the climate's not changed that.
Yeah, I mean, the size of the UK as a hub is quite staggering compared to the other geographies in the other main markets in Europe. And obviously, I mean, as I think I've worked in Silicon Valley a couple of times, and there is still a cachet with London. Even the Silicon Valley guys want to have a hub in London because they can see it's the gateway to Europe. Despite what's ever happening with the Brexit stuff, and obviously it's a good jump-off point between what they do in Australasia as well. So
yeah, absolutely. But today, I mean, I think the thing that I do today is very different to that, because in a sense, we were always doing what we were doing, and the other 249 were doing what you all know as digital now. But we were never doing that, because I'm a web scientist and my superpower is tech. And I founded FlyingBinary back in 2008, although if you check the records, it says 2010, because of what we were trying to do was so radical. And that's when I met Sir Tim Berners-Lee and discovered that what was actually doing was fundamental web science, which was a really good trick, because I didn't even know what web science was. But essentially, the technology we were building is deep tech. And we changed that. We changed the world with deep tech from those beginnings, because deep tech is a different approach to the way in which you develop technology. It has an engineering background. I'm an aerospace engineer. My co-founder is an electrical engineer. We're a company of engineers and quantum physicists and a few other people, mathematicians and what have you. But we knew that what we wanted to do, irrespective of any financial crash, what we wanted to do was actually deliver an inclusion agenda where we left no one behind. Because my belief, based on the fundamental web science that I didn't know I was creating, was that actually we could unlock technology for the next cohort of founders. And so back in 2009, on the 20th anniversary of the web, I was in the Royal Society with Tim Berners-Lee and essentially founded our company to deliver that technology, that deep tech, for Generation Z. And so I'll talk about them in a little bit. But so far, we've used that technology to positively impact over a third of the world's population. And we now pivoted what we do in January 2019. I used my speech on the future of cyber at Davos to announce that we were no longer needing to support Gen Z. They were off and they were running. And Gen Alpha was our focus. So they're 16 to 6 today. And they're the clients that we serve.
So what's Gen A? Sorry, what are you calling Gen A? What?
Gen Alpha. 16
Gen
to
Alpha.
6 they are today. And so
16 to 6.
Yes. So our youngest entrepreneur is actually 5, but you know, in theory, they're 16 to 6.
So they're called Gen Alpha. Okay, that's interesting.
Alpha, yeah.
So both my sons, Ben and James, are 14 and 16, so 16 and 14 respectively. So they're in Gen Alpha.
They are indeed. Then they're very different, Gen Alpha. I mean, I've got, I'll talk about that as we sort of unfold it. But today, I'm an expert, and Gen Alpha is what keeps me awake at night. You asked me that question, because actually what they can do and what they can bring, and based on the science that we've created, the hands of the world, the way in which the world is developed is in their hands, and technology will be the way in which they unlock their own talent. And I'm currently an expert advisor to the G20, which is 60% of the world's GDP, and I've created a global plan to serve that generation. So that was delivered in February. And I've just been onboarded to the United Nations as an expert advisor, because they quite rightly said, what about the other 40% of the world, Jacqui? And it's GDP. And it's like, that's a good point. Inclusion, leave no one behind. And so I'll also lead the UK team for the next 5 years on the new focus for Europe. Now we've Brexited, and what we'll do next under the sort of new programme for Europe, under the new commission cycle, if any of the listeners are familiar with that. And I'll lead the Team UK for that, on the basis of we're actually going to make it a citizen-led approach and changing the outcomes and the health and well-being for citizens across Europe. And I call all of this thing I'm describing the empathy economy, which is based on the 15 years of research, an Honorary Doctorate of Science, because of the impact I've had across the world and with the technology that myself and the team build, really. But for me, with all of this is all really lovely, but my passion's organisations and entrepreneurs. And so we've committed as a company to build technology to support 1 million organisations around the world to create the businesses that will serve Gen Z and Gen Alpha with the technology interventions they want.
Okay.
And so I'm actually creating in the middle of it. That's what you've instructed me while I talk to you today. I'm creating a membership offering of tech, access to tools, and me, because I stepped down from all my office hours, all my mentoring, everything, and I'm going to be focused on this for the next 2 years, and really growing the businesses that will grow the empathy economy to meet the need of the G20 nations and now the UN work of what they're going to change their nations and their economies to support the change for effectively the industrial Internet of Things, but where deep tech plays.
So is this like the next industrial revolution in your definition?
Is, yeah,
Is it the third or the fourth or the fifth? What you say?
So
or is it not really a number?
It's not, because from a web science research point of view, let's say civilization organizes itself around 400-year cycles. So my research goes to 400 BC, runs over across to 2400. So those research cycles that we've built our evidence base around, and we're in that next 400-year cycle. If we flip back 800 years, that was signing the Magna Carta, the creation of Anglosphere. 400 years ago, as my federal colleagues were telling me yesterday, they got their freedom and they set the world on a new path. And we're 400 years on, just over 400 years on. So
that's your planning horizon. Okay.
It is, yeah. So 2,400 at the moment is my planning horizon. It's not on this planet by that time, but yeah.
But you touched on the fact that you're an engineer. I mean, could you explain to the viewers your backstory? How did you get? Because your explanation of what you do today is pretty amazing, right? You're kind of like working on some really, really strategic and societally impacting pieces of work, which is fantastic. But how did you get there? What was the Jacqui before this? Could you explain a bit of that backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that whoever's listening, whatever you've had to deal with, it's only ever preparation, but it never looks like that. So I'm, as I said, an aerospace engineer, and it's been turbulent skies for me since the age of 16, when I had to give up my studies. I didn't even get a chance to fail my exams because my mum taken seriously ill and died. Had to stand in and be there for my family. Right. And essentially, I've gone through. I've put it, well, I was thinking about this when I was doing some prep notes for it. I was thinking, I've been ridiculed for over 25 years because I'm not quite sure whether people dislike the fact I'm an engineer, or I'm female, or I'm a female engineer, because they're like, how do you know this stuff? It's like, well, that's the combination of a web scientist that's done this stuff in deep tech is fairly.
You mean there's a kind of a caricature of what people think you should be?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. Or there's an expectation or a perception of what you should be. Yeah.
Yeah, and quite frankly, what I've done with that being ridiculed over 25 years is I've ignored it, because I think that's
good on you. Good on you.
And in the last 11 years, which is the period we're talking about now, I've mystified most people, and I'm really proud to be part of that Shoreditch rabble that founded the UK digital economy, because I've effectively in 11 years gone from a national joke with the rest of my motley crew in Shoreditch to a national heroine. Because within 6 years of that, what on earth do people think they're doing? I was a top 100 UK entrepreneur.
No, I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, exactly. Fantastic.
And we went from 250 companies to 6.5 million, and the engine of growth that we have today. But what I would say is I got up every single day, even the dark days when I didn't even know I could finish my schooling, and before I had the support to get back into education and what have you, and I shared my passion. And these days, the last 11 years as a web scientist, to support Gen Z initially, understanding that they were delivering a change in this world that the world needs, and now Gen Alpha. And when you get hired as an expert advisor to the G20 and the UN say that we need you on board for that, and you get to lead the next steps for Europe, it sort of doesn't matter how difficult the backstory was. Because this year I've been named as 2020's most influential web scientist. Now, Tim Berners-Lee won't mind about that, but pretty much every other web scientist will. And so it's actually about the unique you, I always think. Yeah. And so we tend to, Malcolm Gladwell's done a fantastic book called Outliers. Yeah. The outliers are what changed the world. And so being an outlier is like winning a gold medal as far as I'm concerned. Outliers was what gets things done. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, I do things in a way that I believe in. So doing the right thing is always the right thing. And I would say, one thing I say to founders that I mentor is, people of integrity expect to be believed. And when we're not, we just let time prove us right, because doing the right thing is always the right thing.
Yes.
At the end of the day, that's whatever my backstory is, with definitely the turbulent skies. As an aerospace engineer, I go for turbulent skies rather than seas. I think that's it.
But did that give you? So, I mean, obviously, you've had this kind of loss when you were quite young. So it's obviously it's that thing about driving you to achieve what you've done. I mean, it's a bit like ignoring all the naysayers and just keep driving forward and believing in yourself and being you could say, I suppose, obsessed about what you want to do and what you want to be, and not listening to the crowd. It sounds like I mean, even from our conversation just now, I get the power and the passion from the level of conviction you have with what you're trying to do. It's amazing. It's really good. It's fantastic.
Well, I think the thing is, somebody said to me on a podcast last week, I think that you're just one of the most curious people I've met. not in a nice way, as a sort of an insult. And I think
really?
the nicest thing that somebody said to me. And he said to me, why is that? I said, because if you were to ask me to put in a nutshell what Gen Alpha are, they're curious. And now I can actually say to Gen Z, I'm fully assimilated now. I'm Gen Alpha. Because curious is what I've always been. If you were to say, what is it that, gets you out of bed in the morning? I'm actually always curious about how things, and it seems to me, because my dissertation was on new jet engine technology to reduce the noise pollution in our city. So yes, it was about aircraft. Yes, it was about looking at new concepts, but it was about making a societal change, even all those years ago. I think actually I've always been interested in how we as engineers create things and people consume them, and what does that mean? So I've always been quite customer focused, I think, but at the time I didn't understand it like that. It was like, just need to be the best aircraft there was.
It sounds like you're a tinkerer. Is that right? A tinkerer trying to work out how things work. Was that right? Or
well, a little bit like that. But I didn't. In a sense, that was what I set out to do. I always say to entrepreneurs, this is really true in the isolation economy that we're in now. You must always set your goals in concrete, but your plans will have to be in sand, and that's never true in today, is it? And you see, I was ready for an aerospace career to build that aircraft, but you see, the first 80 off-plan orders, which was an unusual concept to sell anything you haven't built, was for a country that didn't believe in female engineers. So I didn't get a job on graduation, and so I went back to the company that sponsored me through all of this and said, so what shall I do now then? And they said, there's stuff going on in that computing department we don't actually understand. Let's do a 6-week project to find out what that is.
So you like the Inspector Clouseau?
Well, it was a little bit like, well, how can they not, they're part of an aircraft organization. How can they not understand what we're doing? But actually they didn't. So that was my intro to technology, because I didn't get to do the job of building that aircraft when I came out and graduated.
To answer that question about, did you kind of, was it like a heat-seeking missile magnet to technology? You kind of fell into it, but because your original passion was to go into engineering, making planes or constructing planes.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
and you kind of
I'm still a complete plane geek. If people meet me and I talk about planes, I go, I'm one of the Falklands 19 that got RF Falklands down to Port Stanley, down to Ascension Island to get that runway out of action, so that we could win the Falklands War. That's what people know about me. But I do love planes, because it's just an amazing thing to be able to work on something like that. But I actually didn't stay in that company, because essentially there was no role for me, having done within 2 years what I was told by the unions, because it's a union shop, that takes 10 years to do. So you have to sit on your hands for 8 years. I think you already know me well enough to know that wasn't a good message to give me. So I went to build the first distributed technology stack using technology in oil and gas, mainly because that was a job that needed doing. It was only about an hour away from where I live, and I thought, I'll do that. And then from that, I basically went to be the architect of the Bank of England's clearing services. Those two things might not seem related, but they're both built on.
You keep fixing all these different industries. You keep fixing aerospace, fixing what was the next one? Oil and gas.
Yeah. And I'm the only technologist to put tech across the whole NHS ever. And that's because I actually like to understand what the problem is. And I think that most people who are in tech like tech to be the outcome, this new shiny thing I've got. Whereas I put tech to work So tech
to
is
solve
an
a problem.
enabler.
To solve a problem.
Yeah, so it enables somebody to get a better result of some kind. And so I do care about the end users more than is good for me. And that's why I do irritate people. But I gave up that lucrative tech career 14 years ago to create this one fundamental web science to champion Gen Z, because I actually understood a problem that nobody had uncovered around access to the education system for Gen Z, who were sort of, they were 17 to 7 at the time. And I formed FlyingBinary to actually solve that problem, to bring an inclusion agenda into what is the industrial Internet of Things and solve that engineering challenge for how we get tech to enable in this new world.
So quick
I'm
question.
one of the top 10 innovators in that world now. Only two women.
What I was going to ask you was about the definition of Gen Z. So, because obviously it sounds like you're genned up a bit more on the gens. Boom. Gen Z. So what's the definition of Gen Z then? What's that today? What's the age range for that for Gen Z?
So they're 27 to 17 today. And then what defines them as different is that they're an immersive generation, but they are very much kinesthetic learners. So the generation that's currently dominant across our online world is the millennials, and they're a visual generation. But Generation Z actually get involved in what's doing, and they have a kinesthetic learning. So the sort of the swish and the touch and what have you on the iPad is because it's built for Gen Z. And so for them, they were the first web entrepreneurs essentially, because they got in and they saw what was wrong and they fixed it. And my best example is always Greta Thunberg. She knew a bit about climate change, but she didn't know how to go about changing the agenda. But she knew what she wasn't going to have. And then effectively sat outside of school on her own. And then several years later, I met her at Davos, and she's putting the concept of how we solve that problem into a tight enough, well-defined enough package that people go, I get that, I want that too. And so for me, that's sort of what I do. I look at what is the problem I'm going to solve. I don't tend to solve simple ones. It's not my thing.
So if you think about the Steve Jobs product plan, God rest his soul, and obviously links back to your comment about staying curious, which is one of his kind of Steve Jobisms. But it sounds like the piece around the design of the iPad, he was obviously aware that was kind of like a Gen Z, kind of.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it just shows the product design was actually, he was really thinking about the characteristics of the generation of the future. I mean, it's quite.
Oh well, Johnny Ive, who did the design.
Yeah, Johnny Ive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Johnny Ive, who used to live about 10 minutes away from where I am now. He actually got that. And if you're listening to this thinking, I'm not sure, there's a video on YouTube called a magazine that doesn't work. There's 2-year-olds that show you why the iPad has been such a success, because they have no concept of the fact of anything other than kinesthetic. I need to get involved in it in order to access it. And so give me something, and literally this 2-year-old within two seconds says to her mother, this doesn't work, as she gives her a magazine back. Mother translates that with an iPad, and she's off, and she's sorted. And essentially we have got used to a Gen X generation who are auditory. So it's very interesting that millennials are a visual generation, but podcasts have become hugely important, not because they've got high auditory skills, but because they multitask as a generation. So actually, most people are listening to podcasts while they're doing something else.
Right.
That's what I do. So it's just a really interesting.
It's like information consumption, learning. Yeah, exactly.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely staggering. I mean, I was last week. I had one of my guests who actually runs a podcast company in Manchester, James Mulvaney, and he started. When you're 16, you normally have a paper round. Well, he was doing internet marketing with AOL when he was 16, like 17 years ago. So I jokingly said, "Did you flew to New York to meet AOL?" And I said, "Oh, did you meet Steve Case?" So he obviously knew who Steve Case was. So it just shows how some people. I mean, when I got involved in technology, a few decades ago, probably like yourself, you kind of. Why are you doing that? Why are you getting involved in that technology stuff? And now you look at it now, and it's like it's so cool and it's the place to be, and you know, why you're not in tech, and I find it incredibly amusing actually. I mean, hats off to you though for. So you launched FlyingBinary, or you founded FlyingBinary with Tim Berners-Lee 11 years ago. Is that the kind of, that's the story?
Yeah. So 2009, I was invited to present or be part of the group that was curating fundamental web science, and I went along to find out what web science was, because I didn't know that's what I was doing. But I had understood that Gen Z needed a different approach to tech, and that the idea of tech as an outcome was over. And so I was interested in building for them. And I'd taken the education regulator to court in order to give them access to the technology they needed to pass their exams. And effectively, they were getting 2 grade uplifts at GCSE and 1 grade uplift at GCE. And it was giving them access to university education, because they learn in a completely different way and they use tech to enable their talent. And I've had an original cohort of 6 young men and built that up to over 1,000 people to actually define what the change was. And that was the fundamental web science I'd actually done. So Tim said, come along, I need your help. Because on the 20th anniversary of the web, there's only 18% of the world online.
That was like a Ghostbusters moment. That was like, who are you going to call? Dr. Jacqui Taylor? Yeah.
Well, the thing about it was my team walked out of the Royal Society, which is where we met, to say, well, how does that work? What we do now? I said, I have no idea. But I know what we're trying to do. I know what problem we're solving. The question is how we're going to do it. Well, I'm an engineer, so you engineer something,
but just for the non-engineers on listening to this episode, how would you describe web science then? Because obviously it's got people understand what the web is, usually sometimes. But the combination of web science, what's the layman or simple definition of what web science is? Could you explain that? Or is it not a simple explanation?
No, it is simple. Well, it is simple. Once you dive under the hood, it's not simple, obviously. But it is simple in that, 32 years ago now, Tim put 2 technical protocols, 2 tech approaches together, and said essentially hello world, and built on the internet technology that was built for defense essentially, and was part of a defense project. And what he was doing when he did that was nothing to do with defense, nothing to do with CERN where he sat. He understood that if you could get technology to enable humanity to create what is possible, then actually that was something worth doing. And if you ever hear Tim tell that story, when he got the paper back from his boss, which he had to ask for it back because it wasn't given willingly, because it just got buried in the inbox. And basically on the top right-hand corner, you'll see written in pencil, if you ever see it, vague but interesting. That was the web. And what Tim had said was, on the 20th anniversary, we're 18% of the world online. We're not going to get there. After 20 years, we haven't got that. We need to be able to, in order to allow this to support us all. And essentially, what he did was he built something that he believed allowed humanity to access its own truth. That's what it was all about. He had that path.
He democratized that information access. Yeah.
And effectively allowed us all access to the knowledge. And the thing about it was, if you do that as a scientific research project, then after 20 years, that's how far you get. So what we did as a company, we said, well, we know about Gen Z because that's what we've been supporting for the last 8 years in order to get the education regulator to overturn how it works and the education access to these young people. So we know all of that. All we've got to do is build the tech that does it, because we're engineers, so that's what we did. But web science is actually a heresy, or it was back in 2009, because what it said was there isn't one discipline. One of the things Tim said that day was, you walked in here, whatever you are, me, an aerospace engineer, you walk out as a web scientist, what you're giving up is your specialty, because the web is a holistic offering for everybody to bring their talents to it. So what we need to do is make sure that the tech enables that to happen. So whether you're tech or not doesn't matter. But if you need to get some change done in the world, the web is a platform that you can utilize. And then, we're over 50% of the world online now. We've got plans to go to 80%. There's nothing's going to stop it now. It is what it is. And there's great debates about, there's problems with it. But when you think about where it was and where it is, it's a persuasive and an invasive part of our life. We all use it for our personal and our business life. And so web scientists actually don't sit within a discipline. So the heresy is often, well, you need to understand your own discipline, engineering. I do that. But the web science, when we do the deep tech, it's to combine the science of the web with the engineering. And that's why it's deep tech, because it literally can support you all doing what you all need to do. You don't need to worry about the tech. It's frictionless, it works, you love it, all the rest of it. And I think, something like the iPad is a great example of it just lets you in to do what you want to do. And that's the tech we build. And the thing about web science is, actually, for me, has always been about inclusion, because one of the things that's very interesting about the change we've got going on now, as we move into the industrial Internet of Things and the way in which the technology will be just all pervasive, the way I've just said, is that actually it's those that are not traditional learners that have the talents to give, and probably in roles and jobs we haven't even designed yet. So this is about when the tech does the heavy lift and shift, which is the deep tech we build. It's just there in the background, it does its stuff, and then it asks a human when it wants a decision. And that's what we call advisory deep tech. And that's what we build. And the web science that's underneath it, I probably could be better to give you an example. We didn't know what we were going to do. We just didn't know what it was. And so actually what happened was, I was speaking at a conference. A guy I knew vaguely, but I didn't know very well. We knew who each other were. We had a chat. He was actually the head of news at The Guardian. And he said, I love what you do. It'd be great to, as a journalist, to be part of that. And I said, well, I love what you do, because we both share truth. And that's what, that's what web's founded on. And he said, well, the next project you get, let's work together. If there's a role for me, I'm in. And that was the story, because of course journalists are about telling stories. Yeah. I'm actually Irish by descent. I'm from a long line of Seneschals. Seneschals are storytellers in the Gaelic.
Okay. Whereabouts in Ireland is that?
So Cork City. I should actually be in Cork City today. So I was due a week's break in Cork this week.
So that's my family heritage on one side is Regan, so from Cork as well.
Right. Yeah. O'Brien. So for me, it was about, well, you tell stories, I tell stories, but we just do it in a different way. And essentially, the story we told was 10 years of war in Afghanistan, the human cost. And we put up the first cloud service that actually was publicly available. We hosted that via The Guardian, and that was the birth of the data journalism industry. And essentially, we at FlyingBinary have 34 million people across the world that now collaborate with us to understand, how resonant is that truth for you? Why does it matter? What matters to you? And if you're doing something on the web these days, you're really lucky to get something that has perhaps a minute's interaction, or if you're really looking at a minute and a half, in terms of, because the millennials are online, the way in which they consume is different. For our web science, we get between 8 and 10 minutes interaction.
Oh, you mean like dwell time? You mean dwell time?
Dwell time, yeah. And because it's very sticky, the web science is very sticky, because it's done from a human perspective. It's tech, but it's done from a human perspective. And so data journalism tells us the stories that we need to hear. Doesn't matter if you're tech, doesn't matter if you're a journalist, doesn't matter about any of those things. It just matters we're humans, we're sharing that truth out there. From those two people, there's 7 million of us in the industry today. And that was in 2015 when we launched our first primer for the industry, the first book. We actually socialized that there were 7 million of us from a start point of 2. So anybody listening to this, what I'm talking about, this new empathy economy, is that whole new wave. Sat in Shoreditch in 2009, knowing that we were going to do something that was going to matter. It was going to matter to us if it didn't matter to anybody. And in fact, Simon said, before I pressed the button on the cloud service, I wonder if anybody would care. We care, and we pressed the button. And within an hour, we had 22 million people across the world that cared. And so how can we all deliver value? And then, it went on.
There's a few things here, what you just talked about is there's a bit about Daniel Priestley, the kind of dent. Yeah. So make a dent, the Steve Jobs thing, make a dent on the universe, like whatever you do in your daily work, try and work out how you can actually make an impact and make something that's worthwhile in the long term. Also, you triggered also so another guest I actually want to have on the show, which is somebody I met a couple of years ago, Maggie Philbin.
I know Maggie well.
Yeah, so she's obviously got Teen Tech. She's the CEO of Teen Tech, and you know, her mission, you know, a bit like yourself with the thing about education and the kind of generations of different people about how do they help people, you know, will deal with technology as they grow up, and do they incorporate it into their lives, or do they actually, you know, go into a career, or do they just, you know, use it as part of a tool for their lives? Which I suppose it's that. I mean, linking that thing back to what you just said is, it sounds like, you know, you kind of like being, I want an accidental technologist. You were kind of an engineer and you became an accidental technologist. And now because you've got an engineering background, you were then seen as a very well-respected person in the tech space, and you get asked to give your perspective and your lens on these different problems. It's very interesting your story, how it's evolved, but then you then getting more and more recognition for the stuff you've done. It's fantastic, and it's really
it's not,
really interesting
I'm not
story.
Really an accidental technologist, because the trick was we founded the software engineering discipline, because actually when I went into that computing department, it's like, what on earth is going on here? This is not how you build anything. And so that was the beginnings of the software engineering industry.
Okay.
And that's
which is back to the discipline thing, actually
from.
applying engineering disciplines into software creation, which is always a challenge.
And that's what we did. And we effectively turned around the entire company to enable the production of brand new aircraft using tech. And that was the first time. And I went into oil and gas to do the same, but did a distributed stack. And so for me, it's always, I'm not precious about any tech. It's about what problem you're trying to solve. I'll give you the best tech. So it's like just always best of breed for me. But you see, the industrial Internet of Things is very interesting, because we talk about digital and we talk about the origins of software, but IIoT is very different. So, you know, you might have been able to move yourself into big data, and you might have been able to move yourself into website building and what have you. But shifting yourself into IIoT needs the science and needs the engineering. It is a genuinely different thing.
Designing for scale. Yeah. So I don't know if you know.
So people ask about that scale thing, and actually I say my biggest problem, I do the planet. At the moment, I do just this planet, and despite all the prompts about all these problems on other planets, Jacqui, I do this planet. But if you say to me tomorrow, I need you to do, I don't know, Tanzania. I don't know why you say that. I actually have to do some reconfiguring to just look at Tanzania, because we look at the planet. So for us, we're the invert of most of the models, really. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, I was just going to say that. I actually worked for GE in Jack Welch's days. So I worked in the industrial businesses, in the kind of, you could say, the non-sexy businesses. And then I was there when Gary Went was no. But I was in lighting and appliances and a few other things, and do some stuff in power controls, which was quite industrial, quite manufacturing. And then obviously got involved in the GE Capital business as well. So and NBC, which was obviously the kind of the more sexy, glitzy kind of side of GE, where you go and buy a bank in Hungary, and then everybody fly to Hungary and say, please integrate us into GE. So it's quite exciting. But you know, so the premise of that business, although I know it's been obviously there's been a bit of kind of peaks and troughs and peaks and valleys, was very much on engineering disciplines. You know, with the kind of the GE aircraft engines, plastics, everything like that. So I think, you know, as you're right, you know, what I see today is and I suppose this comes back to the kind of discussion you were saying about education, and also people at different stages of their life stage, is the stuff that the education I went through when I did computer science, engineering science. I did engineering science, computer science at A level, and then you look at today, people are going for more, you could say, not engineering based disciplines, but then they're going, or some of them obviously are, but then they're actually, you know, the career options. So it's a bit like the dilemma for my sons now is about what do they want to go into, and what they're going to be. You know, it's Generation Alpha. You know, what's the future for those individuals and those young males or young females, obviously. What do they actually do as a future career? Because you've probably seen financial services were once the kind of magnet to get into the financial services industry, but now tech is obviously a lot more compelling and a lot more interesting. But what you're saying, I think, which I agree with, is this thing going about having an engineering discipline allows you to switch, because you're kind of like a problem solver, aren't you? That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And I only ever do big problems. I never do anything that's boring. It's like you always got to pit your brain against.
Throw me the big ones.
And I only work collaboratively as well. So we're a meritocracy in our company, and actually we're not all engineers. And I think the interesting thing about the sort of the transition, which is what we're talking about here, is in December 2016 when I got involved, having the UK done its Brexit decision, and I saw what was unfolding. And I thought, do you know, I've been here before. The idea of a meltdown around Brexit, because everybody's saying how it's all going to be a disaster. And that's exactly what everybody was saying to me in 2008. And I thought, it never was. We've thrived on that. So there must be a way of doing this. So in the summer of 2016, having done my role as a science diplomat in the Foreign Office, like part of an outreach team, doing what we're doing for Team UK, then I actually put together an offering in Level 39 in December, and that has now grown to 27,000 organisations. And what I've done is supported them to move to new business models for exactly the economy, the empathy economy I'm talking about now. Now, people are still flipping about with their commercial models, but in the world I'm talking about, that won't get you anywhere. It's a new business model you need, because the technology that we're now building is based on those 27,000 organisations and what they've actually achieved. And they've always had a times 2 return on their investment, 2 times multiplier on their any of their investments. But what I'm talking about is a guarantee. If you do 3 times, you can get a Hollywood film made. So there's many Hollywood films haven't been made because people have given me the money instead. But actually, the organisations that have been with me since December 2016 that are moving on these business models, these new ones, actually, some of them are making 60 return on investment. And if you can show positive P&L for what you're doing these days, whether you're in an organisation, whether you're an entrepreneur, you can actually show cost positive for enabling technology. It's gold. It's gold, because that's not what digital's doing. Digital's not made enough of an impact anyway, but it's not cash positive. And so I think the reality of it is those 27,000 organisations have taught me what the new business models need to be. And that's essentially how I'm able to put a global plan together for the G20 members and then do the UN work, because I actually have seen it grow since December 2016. And based on the tech we built to support it, we're good to go. And so I think the reality of it is I'm now building the tech for the entrepreneurs of the future, for the Gen Z, for the Gen Alpha, because quite frankly, they don't want to work in organisations that are not doing what we're doing, because actually they want to be part of this. They understand we're at a nexus of change, and they want to be part of it. Now, what I say to some of my young entrepreneurs, and my youngest one that's made his millions is 11, and what I said to him in the beginning is, it doesn't matter whether you can define it, that doesn't matter, but what problem are you solving and how? And then we'll work on that. So essentially, wrapping that together, I'm putting together the tech for what I call a cyber safe community, because the thing that we haven't talked about, I mean, I work in the counter-terrorism space, the thing we haven't talked about is that online is a growth industry for the criminals. So lots of what's going on in this crisis is enabling drugs trafficking, people trafficking, and terrorism, because actually people are not doing it in what I call a cyber safe way. So I'm actually launching a membership to literally mentor those entrepreneurs to pivot to a new business model that uses the tech and the tools and the teaching I give them in a brand new way. And that's really my. You mean
to make everything secure online, properly secure?
Well, you see,
is that just like utopia that we'll never get to? I don't know.
Well, we don't want that, because actually the criminals can always outpace us on that. So we want to build something that's security minded but isn't secure. So that's a whole other lecture. But the reality of
Episode 3. Tune in next week. Yeah.
The reality of it is, you don't need to be a cyberpreneur because you've got me. Don't do that bit. The thing is, what value can you deliver to your clients, to your organizations, to your sectors? And then let's figure out the new business model under the empathy economy that delivers it. And then, I'm the win being if you win from a cyber safe point of view. I'll give you that, because that's what I do. And so essentially, when you think of the 250 of us in Tech City that we talked about earlier, going, well, we're just on a march, we know what it looks like. I'm reinventing that for the industrial Internet of Things. based on boiling that down to all the things you need to know, and then throwing out all the things that you don't need to bother with, because I've experimented with all of them, and some of them work, some of them don't. And it might be that other people have got different ideas and we'll flex it again. But essentially, I'll be with that community, the cybersafe community, and we'll be growing the businesses that the nations now have adopted the global plan on. So effectively, you need an ecosystem to service that new need. That's what we're doing.
It's interesting. I mean, back in 2012, actually, it was quite a few years ago. I was working with EE. So when we did the 4G launch, so I was at EE when before we got consumed by BT, and we're working on all the use cases around connected car, connected person, all that kind of thing, connected home. You know, the industrial IoT stuff is obviously a scale up from that, because that's more a consumer play. I suppose it's the and obviously I suppose with the advent of 5G, I know there's been a lot of interesting press around 5G recently with this whole COVID and David Icke and et cetera. So
I helped put the testbed proposition for the UK together, because we need proper research on this. There's no point having stories that are not backed by evidence. I'm a scientist. I need it to be evidence based, and we shift once the evidence is there on the basis that we do. So the 5G strategy for the UK is something that I did with colleagues from DCMS, and essentially 6G and 7G, which is what we work on, we'll be doing the same.
Yes, I suppose it's part of your kind of planning horizon as you look further out, isn't it?
There's much more needed in 2400, but we won't worry about that just now.
Yeah, I mean,
what worry you about it? I mean.
Well, yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll not be here by then, but I don't know. You know, maybe you'll find a technology where we can have everlasting life, and then we'll be all work, on space stations and stuff like that. It's like the more Hollywood movies. Okay, I'll ask Jacqui about that later privately. Anyway, so I mean, I suppose my planning horizon was slightly less than 400 years. But what's any view on what's going to happen? I mean, we're now in 2020, right? So we're in a new kind of decade. Any kind of predictions or things you've got, 5, 10, 25 years out, the kind of time scale that usually people, some people have obviously 10-year plans, but obviously I suppose given the futuristic context of what you've been working on historically, can you give some of the audience some kind of predictions or some views on what's going to happen?
Yeah, so I think the thing about that is effectively that's what I do. The 27,000 organisations, we've been on that journey now for we're now 4 years into that, so we effectively got to the end of our 5-year plan, and essentially I'm just about to do the next 25 years for that group. But one of the things I said before, that changing business model is critical, and because at the moment, across 141 countries that I'm working in, approximately 12% of turnover is going missing to the cyber criminals. And it's actually not the big organisations, because the majority of organisations are not the big, 800-pound gorillas. They're companies like ours, which are lean, nimble, and agile. And so the freemium business model is not going to pervade. Free is never free. But free is actually not cyber safe now. In the isolation economy, which is what I'm calling it, this meantime that we get ourselves through, which every economy is dealing with, that an immediate thing. So before we get to 5 years, know that free is not free and free is not cyber safe. So if that's what you're building on and that's what you're depending on, that needs to be a shift change.
Why do you say free is not cyber safe, or freemium is not cyber safe?
Well, because the reality of it is it's never been free anyway. The human is the product. And from a point of view of Gen Z, who now influence 40% of the economic spend across the world, and Gen Alpha, it won't be tolerated, the idea we're the product. That's not their world. But for 5 years, one of the things, the next 5 years, what I need to say is, if there's no cloud, so if you're not using cloud, you have no AI. So an AI is a cornerstone for the industrial Internet of Things, because artificial intelligence can do the heavy lift and shift. The other thing is the social machines, social platforms like the Facebooks and Twitter and all the rest of it, they have no future either, because they're what's called a walled garden. You're inside, you can't be outside, you can't be connected. They've all IPO'd now. So don't build your business on them, because actually that's not stable. And I think the real watershed is the emergence of the industrial Internet of Things for many businesses, because this is where the rubber's going to meet the road. If you're positioned only for the digital economy in the next 5 years, you need a new plan, and it'll be more than a new business plan, because the reality of it is that is already shifting. And if we've got 60% of the world's GDP shifting in that direction as well, and then obviously we've got to start the work with the UN yet, but that's under the same direction, then now, you know, you happen to be listening to this, you've heard it here first, sort of thing. Make sure that you've got your plan beyond what you're doing now, and more to the point, make sure you've got your business plan. And in terms of 10 years, the value chains will be automated. I think that this crisis has illustrated how fragile the value chains are, the supply chains, the way in which we're all connected, the way in which we interact in the world, how we're connected, how we live our lives, what we depend on. And because of Gen Z, immersive or dominate, I found it very interesting when I was in York, to find that the Van Gogh exhibition was an immersive exhibition. There's no doubt in my mind who their audience they were
appealing to.
Yeah, absolutely. Because kinesthetic learners are already leading our world. 40% of the economic spend is already leading our world. It's not completely over, but that automation will be pervasive. That's an engineering and a science discipline. It's deep tech. So in 10 years, deep tech, that's all there will be.
It's interesting you make the point about you know, the walled gardens, you know, with the you know, the kind of stuff that Scott Galloway's done about the four, which you probably read a while ago. And so you're kind of implying there's kind of a next wave of technology capabilities, technology initiatives, which is actually going to break away from that current you could say set of organizations who were very dominant in our lives, you know, Google, Facebook, you know, the AGFA boys, as I call it, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon.
The FANGs, as I know.
The FANGs, there's also FANGs, there's also, you know, which includes Netflix, obviously, as well, yeah?
Yeah, well, you have to include them because they have that immersive business model. That's where exactly that.
It kind of draws you in, yeah.
Well, because it actually supplies a need in a way that is just the way Gen Z wants to. You know, I know the folks there, if you know about their subscriber base, it's not, yes, of course it's millennials, but actually it's predominantly Gen Z. So those are the business models that you need to be looking at. And what I'd say is 25 years on, I'm doing the research for that now. We start all that as a team next week in terms of putting the detail, the flesh on the bones for the current research base of 2,400. All my predictions in the last 15 years have been correct. So the things I've just said to you, when I did all that 15 years ago, it's all come right. So I would urge you to take away.
That's a bit scary. You need to have a crystal ball.
I'm a web scientist. That's what I'd say. And so I think the thing about it is we're doing that detail work now, so that, you know, the underpinning plans for the digital economies, the work for the UN, etc., is founded on science, is founded on research, so that we effectively look at options, because not everybody is in the same place. No economy is the same. No ambitions the same. This crisis has you know, really focused us on our priorities, I would say. And so perhaps what we might have done when I launched the plan in February and what we'll do now will be different. But that's just the right thing to do. And again, as I said to you earlier, doing the right things has always been the right thing. So it's right to, it just always is. And so it's right to now re-examine the 25-year plan, which we would be creating now anyway, you know, that's what we would be doing, because now we need to set the context and look at where the priorities are in the context of this crisis and what we need to position ourselves beyond the isolation economy. So
I've got a couple of final questions to ask you about. One that's a bit personal, actually. So it's interesting your definition of Generation Alpha. Yeah. So what's your advice to parents of Generation Alphas?
Well, I always say for Gen Z parents, if you haven't worked it out yet, they're a bulldozer. Get out of their way. And having raised one who became a global gaming influencer at 21, I know my stuff because I've learned the hard way. For Gen Alpha, if you don't find a way to deliver them value and ensure they get value, they do it anyway, because they're completely and utterly uninterested in how our institutions, how our systems, how our society works. They know it's wrong, because they're going to fix it their own way. And so what I would say
which is back to
now,
the Greta kind of discussion. So it's a bit like that, yeah.
And the other thing I would say now, in terms of this crisis and where we're going and all the rest of it, you'll need to bootstrap, because fundraising's changed forever. So the way in which money is going to move and the way in which money is going to be available has changed forever. And I'm famous in Tech City for teaching to bootstrap, because I always knew that capital came with strings, and I've never taken any. So
you mean as a catch? You mean as a catch? You take capital as a catch?
Sometimes you can get some synergies with what's going on, but there's always a price. And if you're determined to deliver an inclusion agenda with nobody left behind, it doesn't usually sit alongside funding. So I actually learned to bootstrap, because that matters to me, the agenda, more than anything. And technology needs to be the enabler for any idea you've got. If you didn't get that already from what I said, it can't be the outcome. It can't be the latest shiny tech. That was
what you're saying is some of the tech founders fall in love with the feature map rather than actually looking at the business problem it's solving. Yeah,
that's
so
right.
Build it and they will come.
No,
Gen
Alpha won't. but millennials did. So be clear about that. They were building it for their cohort, and that has worked. But what value you're delivering for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, be really clear about, because they will not come. In fact, you'll need to go find them, because they're not where you expect them to be.
That's a fascinating point around capital raising as well, though, because when I left Tesco in 2007, after doing the Tesco mobile stuff, I went to Silicon Valley and put money into WANdisco, which was a Silicon Valley startup. We eventually we bootstrapped it. We didn't take any VC, and eventually it was listed on the stock market in 2012. So on London AIM, it's had a bit of a kind of as most AIM companies, but fundamentally the tech and the patent and the IP is unique. It's it's worldwide patent. And the interesting thing there, I think, is that what I've noticed in the last 8 years, when I've been working with different tech founders and things like that, is that some of them have a kind of an absolute fascination with the size of their rounds of their capital raising. Yeah. And it's a bit like, I don't know whether it's their peer group competition or I don't know what drives it, but and they obviously have the second fascination of being a unicorn. So it's created a really interesting dynamic, I think, in that kind of space around how you scale and grow, a good idea.
Well, it's interesting, because those 250 founders, there's 220 of us left, and the other 30, we call them the Vicarage and the Ferrari Brigade. And what they were interested in is buying a Vicarage, buying a Ferrari, and going. And so we said buy, because actually that's not what we were interested in. We were all delivering value with that.
There's a bigger purpose. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, are you delivering value for the cohort you're serving? And that's not a sector or an organisation. Not on the web, it's not. Not for what the empathy economy is. Gen Z and Gen Alpha will require you to deliver value to them. And if they're already Gen Z influence 40% of the economic power across the world, I go in on boards and I look at what they're doing, and I don't have to look far to go, have you seen your customer base? How much of this economy are you actually tapping into?
Yes.
What value are you delivering?
Your segmentation.
So that's a really key. Yeah, it's a really key question. What value do you deliver to Gen Z and Gen Alpha? And so all of the cyberspace community, that's what I'll be focusing on, delivering what they deliver and delivering value to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, because they are the cohort that are going to determine what happens after this crisis, not anybody else.
So I suppose you kind of talked then about the kind of advice. So if you come out of university, or you've got a good tech idea, or you want to do something that's really going to make a dent in the universe, we talked a bit about earlier, is the kind of advice to those founders, those co-founders, those leadership teams. What would be your few points you make around that?
Right, so these are going to be the criteria that's going to get you into the cybersafe community if you can answer these questions. So I thought I'd just share them. I've never shared them before, because obviously that community is not open, but I thought this is an ideal time to do that. So I'm basically going to say that none of the current business models are safe to build on. So the entry question, one of the entry questions is, what business model are you using? So I'll know whether they're actually going to position for the future or not. And the other thing is about the empathy economy. I deliberately called it that because it doesn't depend on competition. It depends on collaboration, because those new value chains are not in any one set of controls. So Web 2 that we were talking about earlier, which is, you know, the rise of the FANGs and all the rest of it, although I'd say in Netflix's case they've transcended that. But essentially that actually is a competitive landscape.
Yes.
But it's collaboration that builds this future that I'm talking about.
Yes.
And then the other qualifying question is going to be, what would you do today if you knew you couldn't fail? So if I give you my 15-year plan, which I guarantee you will work, because I've actually got 27,000 organizations making hay on it, what would you do? And then whether they come into cybersafe community or not, my answer to that will be do it. Because actually in this new economy, there's nobody that can tell you you're going to fail, because nobody knows about it. And so the real thing is, entrepreneurs, that
would scare some people, but then it would empower other people depending what their mindset is. Yeah.
And I think the other thing about that is, I'm not saying do it on your own. I'm saying come into the community, I'll help you do it. And I'll share my success plan with you and get your idea out there, because all the requirements and all the ways in which this works they're all no longer any use to anybody. Now you need the new ones. And the thing is, the entrepreneurs and these organizations, the 27,000 organizations, are not all founded. Some of them are organizations you know. And what they've been prepared to do is create an intrapreneur culture. So do some of that meritocracy founding that we do in our companies and bring that into existing organizations. And what it means is that you're willing to invest in yourself and your team. You're willing to learn the new skills on the things that we need during this crisis and beyond. And I've already invested, from FlyingBinary's point of view, in the tech to support 1 million entrepreneurs. I'm taking 1 million people with me this time, and who are prepared to do what they need to do to be part of that cybersafe community and to build the empathy economy. Because I know I can't fail. I've done this 3 times already. I'm not going to fail. But it's a question of whether you see, at the end of the day, what we all do from a tech point of view, we all have a philosophy around what value we're delivering. And we work with other people who share our values. And that's what the empathy economy actually is. People working together, collaborating, who share the same values. And Gen Z and Gen Alpha don't buy from anybody else, because that's who they are. So when you're talking about careers,
they don't buy from anybody else, you said?
No, because they will literally look for that value proposition, and they will buy from people that share their values.
Right. Okay.
And so that's actually what we need to do. So that's why I say one of the advice is what value are you delivering for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And even if they're not your main customer base, make sure you've got an offering that is delivered to them.
Yeah. And that's in B2B or B2C or
it doesn't matter.
B2B2C.
All the business models are broken. None of them work. None of them are safe to build on in industrial Internet of Things. But you need a combination. So, for example, one of the things I've needed, I'm a central banker, so I work in that sort of hot house of how we move money around and what financial instruments we've got and what have you. And I've had to create brand new financial instruments to do this. And at the moment, the fund is $1.6 trillion because we had to do it from scratch. There was nothing out there that supports this. And that's, again, you're not going to have to do that because I've already done that. I know how that works. But in my world, where some of this is sovereign wealth type investment, I work with a Series C and D funders. I don't tend to get involved in the rest of it. Obviously, I'm an angel funder, but I work with Series C and D. And so for them, actually, the financial instruments to support the sort of return we're talking about here, we just don't have those in the market.
Wow. So I feel like we could speak for hours, because the diversity of the topics that you trigger in my head makes my head go racing down different avenues. So all I can do is thank you for that.
You're welcome.
all I can say is I cannot thank you enough for coming on this episode. You constantly surprise me, Jacqui, in the topics that you're covering. I mean, I think the empathy economy and the stuff around the Generation Z and Alpha sounds absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing that with the audience. I mean, if people want to find more about that, is there anywhere to go to find more about it, or is this something they can look? Is it on your FlyingBinary kind of things, or is it a new kind of online resource that you're going to share in the future? So
you can always get me on Twitter. I'm at Jacqui Taylor FB for FlyingBinary. You can always get me on LinkedIn. I'm Dr. Jacqui Taylor there. We're currently refreshing everything ready for Brexit, which starts on the 1st of July. So we won't be quite ready. We've had the UN project came in unexpectedly, so we've deferred that on. But we're currently putting all our web resources into, all the changes to our web resources. It's what we're doing now as we build the tech out to support the million entrepreneurs. But yeah, connect with me anywhere. Get hold of Andrew and he can have my connections. But Cyber Safe Entrepreneurs is a Facebook page of mine. Also, that's Dr. Jacqui Taylor on Facebook, because Gen Alpha and Gen Z don't federate on any of these social platforms, so it sort of doesn't matter which one I use. But I have a community of entrepreneurs who have got skills that need to be transformed for the empathy economy on Facebook. So Cyber Safe Entrepreneurs is on Facebook. Just connect with me there. And I do have a closed empathy economy group on Facebook. You can apply to join that.
Hopefully I'll get in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Because at the end of the day, this is an enormous change. No bigger than the one we did in 2009. But what Tim Berners-Lee always said about this was, never in human history has technology become the bedrock of what we'll all need.
Yeah, the foundation.
It serves us. The citizen, us, we are at the heart of the empathy economy. As I say, it's an advisory tech. The human will make the decision. So none of this Industry 4.0 machine.
Yeah, rise of the machines.
Nobody wants that. Whoever decided on that is
if you're gonna finish on a Skynet message. Yeah, exactly.
And the reality of it is, somebody just thinking that Web 2 is going to pervade, and we just get another platform that everybody's got to on board. Hasn't ever worked with Gen Z or Gen Alpha, quite frankly, because that's not where they are and that's not what they're doing. And so I think the reality of it is it is a whole new proposition. I hope I've conveyed how exciting the agenda is, though, because these value-based changes that I talked about are the changes to create a world we all want to see. We all want to live in, we all want to be part of, we all want to put our energies towards it. Why wouldn't we? And if nothing else, the isolation economy has really focused us on what actually matters.
Yeah, what's important.
And what contribution we can bring. And I think that, people say, oh, will it go away if you let it? But actually it won't, because Gen Z and Gen Alpha, all we've done is move to their space. You're raising two Gen Alpha. I don't need to tell you. I've raised Gen Z. I know this is how it works for them. So we've invaded their world now, and what I've found is that if we're good enough, we'll be allowed to stay as well.
we get blocked from their closed Facebook group. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, it's just one little story, which I had one of the mompreneurs that I work with, and she's raising triplets, Gen Alpha triplets. They're 6. So she has a few more challenges than most. And she came down one morning with her husband to discover all 3 of them dressed, breakfasted, with a piece of paper or a pad of paper and a pencil. And Dad was directed to take the notes. So they said, okay, it's 5 weeks in, you've had a chance to work out what's up and which way this needs to be, and you've not managed. So take a pencil, take a seat, this needs to change. And they reorganised their household. They're 6.
This is the 3 6-year-olds.
Yes. Wow. They reorganised their household, and by the end of the day, they were on the new plan. And I said to Sam, how did you handle it? She said, I had your voice in my head saying, don't get in the way. You might find the locks changed. Because they do know what's right, and they will want a say in that. And to be fair, I said to her, I'll be honest with you, you had 5 weeks. I think that's very generous. Most Gen Alpha will be going, hang on a minute, Mum and Dad, what do you think you're doing? This is like 2 weeks in, we can't go on like this. But, you know, the parents are doing the good jobs that everybody can. But Gen Alpha don't give you that choice. Gen Z will attempt to negotiate, but Gen Alpha don't give you that choice. Because they do genuinely think this is possible. Let's do it. And so Mum and Dad took a list down, and the household is running very smoothly. Thanks very much.
Wow, I've definitely learned something today. I think you've. I don't know if I'm scared or I'm empowered.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not steamrollers because they just wouldn't dialogue it with you. You know, Gen Z are steamrollers, they just run you over. That is quite scary, but actually they disappear and do it without you. That's the thing about Gen Alpha. They just get on and solve it. Don't actually need any permission. Wouldn't think of asking. They just go, well, why is it working like this? I'll fix that. And they're off. So
amazing.
yeah. So if you're raising one, I think that they are amazing teachers. Yeah, or two in your case. They're amazing teachers. We're not necessarily empowered to listen though. So because they're kinesthetic and they don't, you know, auditory is fairly poor, visual is not their thing, but they are immersed in what they're doing. Learning that language is a facilitation, quite frankly, and they'll be your absolute number one supporters when you do it. But often their wisdom is way beyond ours. You know, they're just very savvy. So, and they do really see the changes they want to make, and they just get on and do them.
Wow.
So, there we go. Anyway, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and speak to you, Andrew. Really have enjoyed it.
You've stolen my line. No, it's been absolute honour and pleasure to get some time with you. No, it has. It's fantastic. I feel like we'll have to get you on a future episode, and you can update us on how the empathy economy is coming along. But I'm really impressed with your plan and your strategy. It's fantastic, and I wish you all the best with that. And I'm sure it's going to be awesome. So
thank you.
That's
and welcome everybody to the empathy economy.
That's kind of like a Generation Alpha kind of, you know, awesome, isn't it? Kind of, maybe I'm showing my age. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. That was Andrew Turner, the founder and host of the G&T Session podcast with Dr. Jacqui Taylor. Founder and CEO of FlyingBinary and all-round good egg, and amazingly some amazing stories, and thanks for sharing your stories about what you've been through and what you're doing in the future, and let's catch up soon. Thanks, Jacqui.
That's great. Thanks. Bye.